Hello everyone. In this lesson, we are going to add, subtract, and multiply complex numbers. So let's start with example number 9. In example number 9, we must combine the real numbers together. So -8 plus a -1. So let's write that down. We must combine the real parts together. So plus a -1. And then now we're going to group the imaginary parts together. So imaginary 3i plus a -2i. So again, when we add complex numbers, we take the real parts, -8 plus -1, that is -9. And the imaginary parts, which is 3i plus a -2i, which is 3i minus 2i equals 1i, just I. So our final answer is -9 plus I. So the real part equals to -9, and the imaginary part is I. In example number 10, we are going to subtract two complex numbers. Remember, the complex numbers has a real part and an imaginary part. Now we must group the real parts together. So I'm taking 36, subtract 12, and that's the real parts, plus -3i, subtract 24i. Again, 36 minus 12, 36 minus 12, which is 24. So I write that down, 24, plus the imaginary parts are -3i minus -24, which is -27i. So now we're going to classify real, which is 24, and imaginary part is -27i. Remember, I is the imaginary part, and a number by itself is the real part. So let's review. Our complex number, the answer is -9 plus I. If we separate them apart, -9 is the real part, and the imaginary part is I. The answer, when we simplify, the complex answer is 24 plus -27i. When we separate them, we get the real part, which is 24, and the imaginary part is -27i. In example number 12, we have -5, subtract -6, that's the real part, plus -5i, subtract -6i, that's the imaginary part. Now distribution, we have -5, negative and a negative is a plus 6, plus -5i, minus a minus is also a positive 6i. Now combine the real parts together. -5 plus 6 is just 1, plus -5i plus 6i is just 1i. So the final answer is a complex number 1 plus I, and the real part is 1, and the imaginary part is just I. In example number 13, we are going to multiply two complex numbers together, and we are going to treat a complex number as a number with a variable like x. So we'll do FOIL method. So we'll say -1 times 15 first, and then -1 times -I. Then we go under, we go 9i times 15, and 9i times -1i. So when we take -1 times 15, we get -15. -1 times -I is plus 1i. When we go under, 9 times 15 is 135i. 9i times -I is -9i squared. Now remember, by definition, the square root of -1 equals to I. the square root of negative 1 times the square root of negative 1 equals negative 1. So I times I equals I squared equals negative 1. Now we combine similar terms. We have negative 15 plus I plus 135I is 136I, negative 9, and times I square, and I square is negative 1. So we get negative 15 plus 136I plus 9, and negative 15 plus 9. We add the real parts together, and we get negative 6 plus 136I. In example number 14, we multiply 6 times negative 5 using the FOIL method. 6 times AI, and when we multiply under, we get negative 7I times negative 5 and negative 7I times positive AI. So 6 times negative 5 is negative 30. 6 times AI is positive 48I. Negative 7I times negative 5 is positive 35I. And negative 7I times AI is negative 42I squared. To simplify, we combine similar terms. So we copy negative 30 plus 48I plus 35I is 83I minus 42. I squared is negative 1. We have 30 plus 83I plus 42, positive 42, and negative 30 plus 42 is the real part. The imaginary part is 83I. So our final answer is 12 plus 83I. In example 16, we're going to multiply the complex number by its conjugate. The conjugate is the opposite of a plus I, which is 8 minus I. The conjugate of 3 minus 2I is 3 plus 2I. And the conjugate of negative 7 minus 5I is negative 7 plus 5I. Now we use FOIL method to multiply the complex number by its conjugate. So we multiply a times 8, a times negative 1. Now under, we multiply I times 8 and I times negative I. 8 times 8 is 64. A times negative I is negative AI. Now under, when we multiply, we get I times 8, which is positive AI, and I times negative I is negative I squared. Combine similar terms, negative AI plus AI is 0. So we get 64 minus I squared. And I squared is negative 1. So we have 64 minus negative 1, which is 64 plus 1, and our final answer is 65. We notice that when we multiply a complex number by its conjugate, the answer is a real part, which is 65. In example number 18, we have negative 7 times negative 7, negative 7 times 5I, negative 5I times negative 7, and negative 5I times positive 5I. Now we get negative 7 times negative 7 is 49 minus 35I plus 35I and minus 25I squared. Now we have negative 35I plus 35I. We can cancel that. That is 0. So now we have 49 minus 25 times I squared is negative 1. So our final answer is 49 plus 25, which is 74, and that is also a real number. So when we multiply a complex number by its conjugate, the outcome is a real number. Now I'd like you to try number 11 and number 17. Good luck on your homework, and I will see you in the next video.